Pregnant mother bear. Got stuck in the car window and gave birth on the road. What this human baby did will shock you. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The sun was just beginning to set over the quiet stretch of Pinewood Highway, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. It was that magical hour when the forest creatures typically emerged from their daytime hiding spots. Bryn Holloway clutched the steering wheel of her blue sedan tightly, her eyes scanning the road ahead for any movement. She had been driving for hours, desperate to reach her sister's cabin before nightfall. Her 6-month-old daughter, Willow, had finally fallen asleep in her car seat after fussing for most of the journey. "Just a little further, baby girl," Bryn whispered, glancing at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Willow's tiny chest rose and fell with each peaceful breath. Her chubby cheeks flushed pink from crying earlier. Bryn smiled tiredly. This impromptu trip had been necessary after the fight with her husband, Theo. She needed space to think, to breathe, and her sister's remote cabin seemed like the perfect escape. The road narrowed as it curved through the dense forest. Tall pines loomed on either side, their shadows growing longer as daylight faded. Bryn reached for her water bottle, taking a quick sip before returning her attention to the road. That's when she saw it. A large, dark shape lumbering across the asphalt about 50 yards ahead. "Oh my God!" Bryn gasped, immediately easing her foot onto the brake. The shape materialized into a massive black bear, moving slowly across the road. Its fur gleamed in the last rays of sunlight, and even from this distance, Bryn could see the distinctive, rounded belly of a pregnant animal. The car rolled to a gentle stop about 30 feet from where the bear now paused, its snout lifting to sniff the air. Bryn's heart hammered against her ribs. She had grown up in rural areas and knew the dangers of wild animals, especially bears. Pregnant females were particularly unpredictable and protective. "It's okay," she whispered to herself. "Just stay calm and wait for it to pass." But the bear didn't move on. Instead, it seemed drawn to something near the roadside. Bryn squinted, trying to make out what had captured the animal's attention. A forgotten picnic basket? Some garbage left by careless tourists? Whatever it was, the bear was now moving toward the passenger side of the road, just a few feet from the tree line. Bryn reached for her phone, thinking she should document this unexpected wildlife encounter to show her sister later. As she fumbled with the device, she accidentally hit the horn with her elbow. The short, sharp blast shattered the evening quiet. The bear reared up in surprise, unleashing a terrified roar that made Bryn's blood run cold. Willow startled awake, her frightened wails joining the chaos. The bear, now panicked, charged toward the nearest hiding place, Bryn's car. Time seemed to slow down as Bryn watched in horror. The massive animal barreled toward her vehicle, clearly seeking shelter from some perceived threat. Rather than attacking, the bear attempted to squeeze through the half-open passenger window, driven by blind panic. "No, no, no!" Bryn screamed, fumbling with her seatbelt as the enormous creature struggled to force its bulky frame through the window. The car rocked violently as the bear thrashed, becoming increasingly wedged in the tight space. Its panicked grunts and the sound of claws scraping against metal filled the air. Bryn turned to check on Willow, who was now crying hysterically. She had to get her daughter to safety, but how? The bear was blocking the passenger side, and attempting to exit from the driver's side might put them directly in the animal's path if it managed to free itself. Making a split-second decision, Bryn carefully unbuckled herself and climbed into the back seat. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here," she soothed, quickly unstrapping Willow from her car seat and holding her close. The little girl's sobs quieted slightly at her mother's touch, but her wide blue eyes remained fixed on the struggling bear. Outside, the situation was deteriorating. The bear had managed to get its head and upper body through the window, but was now hopelessly stuck at the midsection. Its back legs scraped desperately against the car door, leaving deep gouges in the paint. Worse still, Bryn could see a clear fluid beginning to seep down the animal's hind legs. "Oh, God," she whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She's going into labor. Bryn's mind raced through her options. The nearest town was at least 20 miles back, and there was no cell service in this remote stretch of forest. She couldn't drive with a bear hanging halfway through her window, and leaving on foot with a baby would make them vulnerable in the darkening woods. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm her, Bryn spotted headlights approaching from the direction she had come. Relief flooded through her. Help was coming. She clutched Willow tighter, whispering reassurances as both human and bear waited to see what would happen next. The approaching vehicle slowed to a stop about 50 feet behind Bryn's car. Through her rear window, she could make out a rugged pickup truck with its high beams illuminating the bizarre scene. A tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the headlights. "Hello?" a deep voice called out cautiously. "Anyone in there?" "Yes," Bryn shouted back, her voice cracking with emotion. "Please help us. There's a bear stuck in my window, and I think she's in labor." The figure approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance from the trapped animal. As he came closer, Bryn could see he was an older man with weathered features and a salt-and-pepper beard. He wore a forest ranger's uniform. "Name's Ranger Garrett Finch," he called out calmly. "Been working these woods for 30 years, but can't say I've ever seen anything quite like this." The bear let out another pained roar, her struggles becoming more frantic as contractions gripped her body. Ranger Finch assessed the situation with a practiced eye. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay very still," he instructed. "That's a black bear, about 300 pounds, I'd reckon, and she's definitely in labor. Any sudden movements could cause her to panic more." "What do we do?" Bryn asked, trying to keep her voice steady for Willow's sake. "I've got some tranquilizers in my truck," Ranger Finch replied, "but I'm hesitant to use them on a bear in labor. It could harm the cubs." He thought for a moment. "First things first, let's get you and your little one to safety. Can you carefully make your way out the driver's side door? Move real slow, and I'll be right here." Bryn nodded, taking a deep breath to calm herself. With Willow clutched tightly against her chest, she carefully slid toward the driver's side door. The bear seemed too preoccupied with its own predicament to pay them much attention, but Bryn's heart still pounded with fear as she reached for the handle. The door creaked open, and Bryn winced at the sound. The bear's head swiveled toward them, dark eyes wild with pain and fear. For a moment, everything froze, the mother bear staring directly at the human mother and child. Then, something unexpected happened. The bear's frantic struggles subsided slightly, as though something about the sight of Bryn protecting her baby resonated on some primal level. In that brief moment of connection between mothers, Bryn slipped out of the car, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Ranger Finch was immediately at her side, guiding her toward his truck. "That's it, nice and easy," he encouraged. "Let's get you somewhere safe, then figure out how to help our mama bear." As they reached the safety of the ranger's vehicle, a loud, agonized roar split the air. The bear's contractions were intensifying, her massive body shuddering with each new wave of pain. "She's getting close," Ranger Finch observed grimly. "Poor thing's trapped and terrified. Not an ideal birthing situation." Bryn looked down at Willow, who had quieted in her arms and was now watching the scene with an almost eerie calmness. "What can we do to help her?" she asked. The ranger scratched his beard thoughtfully. "I've got some equipment that might help us free her, but with her in active labor, it's risky. We might have to wait until after she delivers." "But what if the cubs get hurt when they're born? She can't even reach them if they fall onto the road," Bryn protested. Ranger Finch nodded grimly. "You're right about that. Let me radio for backup, see if we can get a wildlife vet out here." As the ranger reached for his radio, another vehicle appeared on the horizon, its headlights cutting through the growing darkness. The car slowed as it approached the bizarre roadside scene. "Looks like we've got more company," Ranger Finch observed, raising an eyebrow. "Let's hope they can help rather than complicate things." The approaching car, a sleek black SUV, came to a stop behind the ranger's truck. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out, her expression shifting from confusion to shock as she took in the trapped bear. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, hurrying toward them. "What happened?" Bryn immediately recognized the voice. "Zara?" The woman stopped in her tracks, peering through the dim light. "Bryn, is that you?" In a twist that seemed almost too coincidental to be real, Bryn found herself face to face with Dr. Zara Chen, her college roommate who had gone on to become a wildlife veterinarian. "I can't believe it," Bryn gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I work at the wildlife sanctuary about 30 miles north," Zara explained quickly, her professional training already kicking in as she assessed the situation. "I was heading back from a conference when I saw this." She gestured toward the trapped bear. "Is that a pregnant black bear stuck in your car window?" "Yes, and she's in labor," Ranger Finch interjected. "Dr. Chen, I presume. Your timing couldn't be better." As the adults discussed rescue options, Willow squirmed in Bryn's arms, making soft cooing sounds. Her tiny hand reached out toward the struggling bear, as though she felt some connection to the animal's plight. The gesture was so innocent, so pure in its compassion, that it momentarily silenced everyone. The bear let out another agonized roar, and this time they could all see the unmistakable signs that birth was imminent. Time was running out to save both mother and cubs, and they would need to act quickly. With night falling fast and a new life about to enter the world under the most dangerous of circumstances, the unlikely group prepared to face a challenge unlike any they had encountered before. The true test of courage, compassion, and connection between species was just beginning. Night had fully descended now, the forest around them transformed into a shadowy labyrinth. Ranger Finch had set up powerful floodlights from his truck, illuminating the surreal scene in harsh white light. The trapped bear's eyes reflected the brightness, giving her an almost supernatural appearance as she continued to struggle and roar. "We need to create a safe zone beneath her," Zara instructed, pulling equipment from her SUV. "When those cubs come, they're going to drop straight onto the asphalt." "I've got some blankets in my trunk," Bryn offered, bouncing Willow gently in her arms. The baby had become unusually quiet, her eyes fixed on the suffering animal with an intensity that seemed beyond her 6 months of age. "I'll get them," Ranger Finch volunteered. "You stay here with the little one." As the ranger cautiously approached Bryn's car, maintaining a safe distance from the bear's powerful rear legs, the radio on his belt crackled to life. "Ranger Finch, come in," a staticky voice called. "We've got reports of unusual activity on Pinewood Highway. Everything okay out there?" Finch grabbed the radio. "This is Finch. We've got a situation at mile marker 42. Pregnant black bear trapped in a vehicle window, active labor in progress. I've got civilian assistance including a wildlife vet. Request immediate backup and road closure half-mile in both directions. Copy that. Sending units now. ETA 20 minutes. May not have 20 minutes, Finch muttered as he pocketed the radio and carefully retrieved the blankets from Bryn's trunk. Meanwhile, Zara was assembling what looked like a complex pulley system from her emergency kit. "I've used this to help extract large animals before," she explained, noting Bryn's curious gaze. "If we can get it positioned correctly, we might be able to ease some of the pressure on her abdomen while she delivers." "Will that work?" Bryn asked doubtfully, eyeing the contraption. "Honestly, I'm not sure," Zara admitted, "but we have to try something." A new sound cut through the night, the rumble of an approaching motorcycle. All three adults turned to see a single headlight weaving up the highway. The bike pulled to a stop beside the growing collection of vehicles, its rider dismounting with fluid grace. The newcomer removed his helmet, revealing a young man with copper-colored hair pulled back in a short ponytail. He wore a leather jacket emblazoned with a patch reading, "Pine Valley Wildlife Rescue." "Heard the call on my scanner," he said without preamble, striding toward them with purpose. "Name's Reed Blackwood, volunteer wildlife rescuer." His eyes widened slightly as he took in the bizarre tableau. "Holy, that's not something you see every day." "Mr. Blackwood," Ranger Finch acknowledged with a brief nod. "Good timing. We could use another pair of hands." As Reed joined their impromptu rescue team, Bryn felt a strange sense of destiny, as though unseen forces had conspired to bring together exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. The coincidence of Zara's arrival had been surprising enough, but now a trained wildlife rescuer, too. "Bryn," Zara called, interrupting her thoughts. "Could you hold this end of the pulley while I secure the other side?" Bryn looked down at Willow, uncertain. Reed stepped forward, extending his arms. "I can take the little one," he offered, his voice gentler than his rugged appearance would suggest. "My sister has twins. I'm good with babies." Hesitantly, Bryn transferred Willow to Reed's capable hands. The baby regarded him solemnly for a moment before reaching up to grasp a lock of his coppery hair that had escaped his ponytail. "Sorry about that," Bryn said, hurrying to help Zara with the pulley system. "No problem," Reed replied, carefully extracting his hair from Willow's surprisingly strong grip. "She's got spirit. What's her name?" "Willow," Bryn answered over her shoulder. "Nice to meet you, Miss Willow," Reed said formally, earning a toothless smile from the infant. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a particularly agonized roar from the bear. Everyone turned to see a new development. The bear's struggles had intensified, and now small rivulets of blood were mixing with the amniotic fluid on her hind legs. "That's not good," Zara muttered, her professional demeanor slipping for a moment. "The birth canal might be obstructed due to her position." "What does that mean?" Bryn asked, fear creeping into her voice. "It means we're out of time," Zara replied grimly. "If we don't free her now, we could lose both mother and cubs." Ranger Finch rubbed his beard, thinking quickly. "I've got a hydraulic spreader in my truck. Use it for vehicle extractions and emergencies. Might be able to widen the window frame enough to ease the pressure." "Do it," Zara instructed, already moving to prepare the area beneath the bear with the blankets. "Reed, I'll need your help positioning these catch blankets. We need to create a soft landing zone for the cubs." As Ranger Finch hurried to retrieve the equipment, a strange calm seemed to fall over the scene. The bear's struggles subsided momentarily, as though she sensed that help was coming. In the arms of the wildlife rescuer, baby Willow continued to watch with that same eerie concentration. "It's like she understands what's happening," Reed remarked, following Willow's gaze. I know, Bryn agreed, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She's been oddly fascinated by the bear since we first saw her crossing the road. Ranger Finch returned with what looked like an oversized set of metal jaws attached to a pump handle. Everyone stand back, he ordered, positioning himself carefully near the trapped bear. This is going to be tricky. The bear, seeming to sense his approach, renewed her struggles, snarling and clawing at the air. Finch froze, waiting for her to tire herself out again. We need a distraction, Zara muttered. Something to calm her down just long enough for Garrett to position the spreader. As if in response, Willow began to sing. Not words, of course, but a soft, musical babbling that somehow carried over the chaos. The bear's thrashing slowed, her massive head turning toward the sound. Those watching could hardly believe what they were seeing. The wild animal actually appeared to be listening to the baby's improvised song. Keep doing that, Reed whispered to Willow, moving cautiously closer to the car so the bear could better see and hear the child. Under the spell of the infant's gentle noises, the bear grew still enough for Ranger Finch to carefully position the hydraulic spreader on the window frame. Ready? He asked, looking to Zara for confirmation. She nodded, positioning herself to assist the bear once the pressure was relieved. Do it. Finch began to pump the handle, and the metal jaws of the spreader slowly forced the window frame to widen. The sound of groaning metal filled the air, but Willow's soft babbling never faltered. The bear remained remarkably calm, only occasionally huffing in discomfort. It's working, Bryn breathed, hardly daring to hope. Just as the window frame had widened by several crucial inches, the unthinkable happened. A loud crack echoed through the forest as the frame gave way more suddenly than expected. The bear, surprised by the sudden release of pressure, lunged forward in panic, directly toward Reed and baby Willow. Bryn screamed, lunging forward instinctively to protect her child, but Reed was faster. In one fluid motion, he spun away from the bear's path, shielding Willow with his body. The bear's massive form crashed onto the asphalt, her momentum carrying her several feet past them. For one terrible moment, everyone froze, expecting the bear to attack. Instead, the animal collapsed onto her side, her massive body convulsing as a contraction rippled through her. A gush of fluid poured onto the road as the first cub began to emerge. Nobody move, Zara commanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Let her deliver. They watched in awe as nature took its course. The bear, despite her traumatic ordeal, instinctively knew what to do. With several powerful pushes, she delivered a tiny, wet bundle of dark fur. The newborn cub was motionless at first, concerning everyone who watched. Then, to their immense relief, the mother bear began to lick her baby vigorously, cleaning away the birth membrane and stimulating it to breathe. The tiny creature responded with a weak squirm, and then a more determined wiggle. One cub delivered, Zara narrated softly. Black bears typically have 2 to 3 in a litter. Sure enough, within minutes, the mother bear was seized by another contraction. The second birth proceeded more quickly, another tiny cub joining its sibling on the asphalt. Again, the mother performed her vital cleaning ritual, coaxing life into her newborn. 2 healthy cubs, Zara confirmed, her professional demeanor giving way to a smile of relief. Now we need to give her space to bond with them. But nature wasn't finished with surprises. As they began to back away, the bear was gripped by yet another contraction. A third cub, Ranger Finch remarked. Not uncommon, but definitely makes for a busy mama. The third birth, however, didn't progress as smoothly as the first 2. The bear seemed to struggle, her powerful body straining with effort but making little progress. Zara's expression grew concerned. "The cub is stuck," she whispered. "Breech position, maybe, or tangled in the umbilical cord." "Can we help her?" Bryn asked anxiously. Zara shook her head slightly. Approaching a wild bear with newborn cubs is about the most dangerous thing a person can do. She'd see it as a threat and attack. They watched helplessly as the mother bear struggled, growing visibly weaker with each attempt. The first two cubs had begun to mew pitifully, sensing their mother's distress. What happened next would later be described by Ranger Finch in his official report as the damnedest thing I've ever witnessed in 30 years of wildlife service. Baby Willow, still cradled in Reed's arms, began to fuss and strain toward the suffering bear. Her little face scrunched up with what looked remarkably like concern, and she reached out her tiny hands insistently. "She wants to go to the bear," Reed said incredulously. "Absolutely not," Bryn replied, reaching to take her daughter back. But before the transfer could happen, a new sound cut through the tension, the wail of sirens in the distance growing rapidly louder. The approaching rescue vehicles, while desperately needed, now presented a new danger. "The noise will panic her," Zara warned, looking anxiously toward the sound. "If she feels threatened now, with cubs to protect—" Ranger Finch was already on his radio. "Base, this is Finch. Tell those units to kill the sirens now. Repeat, no sirens. We have a wild animal situation that requires quiet." The sirens continued for a few more agonizing seconds before cutting off abruptly. But the damage was done. The mother bear, already distressed from her difficult labor, rose unsteadily to her feet, positioning herself protectively in front of her two delivered cubs. The third cub remained partially emerged, still trapped in the birth canal. "This is bad," Zara murmured. "If she tries to flee now, that third cub won't make it." As if understanding the gravity of the situation, Willow's fussing escalated to full-blown wailing. Her cries, surprisingly similar to the sounds the bear cubs were making, seemed to penetrate the mother bear's panic. The huge animal hesitated, her head swiveling toward the human baby. What followed defied all conventional wisdom about wild animal behavior. Instead of becoming more aggressive at the sound of Willow's cries, the bear seemed to respond to them. Her posture softened slightly and she turned her attention back to her unborn cub, renewing her efforts to deliver it. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Ranger Finch breathed. "It's like the babies are communicating somehow." The bear gave a final, mighty push, and at last, the third cub slid free. Unlike its siblings, this one didn't move at all, its tiny form alarmingly still on the cold asphalt. The mother bear nudged the motionless cub, licking it vigorously, but there was no response. A sense of shared grief settled over the human observers as they realized the cub hadn't survived its difficult birth. Then, once again, Willow changed everything. Her cries transformed into insistent grunts and babbles, her little body straining so hard in Reed's arms that he had to adjust his grip. "What is she doing?" he asked, bewildered. "I think she wants to help," Bryn replied, a strange certainty filling her. Against every maternal instinct, she heard herself saying, "Let her down." "Are you serious?" Reed stared at her in disbelief. "Not on the ground," Bryn clarified quickly, "just closer. Hold her where she can see better." Against his better judgment, and with a cautioning look from Ranger Finch, Reed carefully knelt, bringing Willow closer to the level of the bears but still maintaining a safe distance. Willow's babbling grew more animated, her tiny hands reaching toward the still cub. The mother bear, who by all natural law should have been attacking these humans for approaching her newborns, watched with what could only be described as curiosity. "I've never seen anything like this," Zara whispered, transfixed by the unfolding scene. Then came the true miracle. Responding to Willow's persistent sounds, the mother bear gently nudged her stillborn cub, pushing it a few inches toward the humans, an action so contrary to natural bear behavior that Ranger Finch later confessed he briefly wondered if he was hallucinating. "She's bringing it to us," Zara realized. "She wants our help." Acting purely on instinct now, Zara slowly approached and knelt beside the tiny, motionless cub. With the mother bear watching intently, the veterinarian carefully picked up the newborn and quickly assessed it. "Airways blocked," she diagnosed, her training taking over despite the surreal circumstances. With expert movements, she cleared the cub's mouth and nose, then gently massaged its tiny chest. For several heart-stopping moments, nothing happened. Then, the miracle they'd all been hoping for. The cub gave a weak shudder and emitted a faint squeak. "It's alive!" Bryn gasped. Zara continued her gentle ministrations until the cub was breathing regularly, then carefully placed it on the ground near its mother. The bear immediately gathered the revived cub to her, licking it vigorously as it squirmed with increasing strength. As the humans backed away, giving the reunited bear family space, the emotional weight of what they'd just witnessed settled over them. Tears streamed freely down Bryn's cheeks as she took Willow back into her arms, holding her daughter close. "Your baby just helped save a bear cub," Reed said, his voice filled with wonder. "I've been working with wildlife for 5 years, and I've never seen anything remotely like this." Ranger Finch's radio crackled as the backup units arrived, their headlights illuminating the edge of the scene. "Maintain perimeter," he instructed them. "We've got a mother bear with newborn cubs. Keep traffic blocked and wait for my signal." As wildlife officials quietly set up a safe perimeter, the mother bear seemed to gather her strength. With gentle nudges, she encouraged her cubs to nurse for the first time, their tiny bodies wiggling against her fur as they found their way to sustenance. "We should name them," Bryn suggested, softly, still emotional from the incredible experience. "The rangers will probably tag them eventually," Zara explained. "But they don't typically name wild animals." "Still," Bryn insisted, "they deserve names after all that." "Especially the little fighter." Reed smiled. "How about Miracle for the third one? Seems fitting." "I like that," Bryn agreed. She looked down at Willow, who was now watching the bear family with heavy-lidded eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to her. And maybe hope and faith for the other two? Because that's what tonight has been about. As they stood watching the bear family in the gentle glow of the floodlights, a new vehicle pulled up. A large animal transport van from the wildlife sanctuary. "Perfect timing," Zara noted. "Once she's had a chance to nurse and bond with the cubs, we'll need to relocate them somewhere safer." Bryn looked at her questioningly. "You're not just going to leave them here?" "Too dangerous," Ranger Finch explained. "Both for them and for people. A mother bear this close to the highway is a recipe for trouble. The sanctuary has a protected release site deep in the forest, away from human activity. They'll have a much better chance there." As they discussed the relocation plan, none of them noticed the dark figure emerging from the forest edge. A massive male bear, drawn perhaps by the scent of the newborns or their mother. By the time Ranger Finch spotted the newcomer, it was already approaching the vulnerable family at a determined pace. "Male bear!" he shouted in warning, reaching for his tranquilizer gun. "They sometimes kill cubs that aren't theirs." The mother bear, weakened from her ordeal, struggled to her feet, positioning herself between the approaching male and her nursing cubs. Her protective instinct was powerful, but in her depleted state she was no match for a healthy male. The situation had just taken another deadly turn, and the night's dangers were far from over. "Everyone back to the vehicles now," Ranger Finch commanded, his authoritative voice cutting through the tension. He positioned himself between the approaching male bear and the humans, his tranquilizer gun raised but not yet fired. He knew he had only one shot before the bear would likely charge, and he needed to make it count. The mother bear let out a warning growl, her exhausted body summoning its last reserves of strength to protect her newborns. The cubs, sensing the danger, huddled together behind her, their tiny forms trembling visibly. "We can't just leave her," Bryn protested, clutching Willow tightly against her chest. The baby had begun to fuss again, as though she too sensed the new threat. "We don't have a choice," Reed replied grimly, gently but firmly guiding Bryn toward Zara's SUV. "That male is twice her size, and she's in no condition to fight." Zara, however, wasn't retreating. Instead, she was quickly rummaging through the equipment in her vehicle, emerging with what looked like a small canister. "Capsaicin deterrent," she explained, joining Ranger Finch. "Bear pepper spray, most effective non-lethal deterrent we have." The male bear was now less than 50 feet away, his massive form illuminated by the floodlights. Standing nearly 7 feet tall on his hind legs, he was indeed an imposing figure, his dark fur glossy and his muscles rippling beneath it. Unlike the mother bear's frightened panic earlier, this animal moved with predatory purpose. "He's not showing signs of aggression toward us," Ranger Finch noted, keeping his voice low. "He's focused on her and the cubs." "That's what I'm afraid of," Zara replied. "Males will kill cubs that aren't theirs to bring the female back into estrus. It's common behavior." The mother bear was clearly intimidated by the male's approach but held her ground, her maternal instinct overriding her fear. She roared a warning, the sound echoing through the forest, but the male continued his advance undeterred. From the relative safety of Zara's SUV, Bryn watched the standoff with growing horror. "There has to be something we can do," she said to Reed, who had joined her in the vehicle. Before Reed could respond, Willow let out a piercing wail that startled everyone, including the bears. Both animals turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted from their confrontation. What happened next defied explanation. Instead of ignoring the human baby's cry, the male bear actually hesitated, his massive head tilting slightly as though listening. The mother bear seized the opportunity, gathering her cubs with gentle nudges of her snout, urging them to shuffle toward the forest edge away from the male. "She's trying to escape with the cubs," Zara observed, her voice tinged with hope. But the male wasn't so easily deterred. After his brief distraction, he returned his attention to the retreating mother and cubs, lumbering after them with renewed purpose. "I've got to take the shot," Ranger Finch decided, raising his tranquilizer gun and taking careful aim at the male bear. Just as his finger tightened on the trigger, a new sound cut through the night, the howl of a wolf somewhere in the forest, answered almost immediately by several others. The chorus of howls grew louder, suggesting a pack was moving closer. The male bear froze, his attention diverted by this new potential threat. Wolf packs were known to occasionally challenge bears, especially when the bear was alone. Though a healthy adult bear could typically fend off wolves, it wasn't a fight most bears would choose to engage in. "Didn't expect that," Ranger Finch muttered, his fingers still poised on the trigger. "Wait," Zara urged, placing a hand on his arm. "Let's see what happens." The wolf howls continued, seeming to come from multiple directions now. It was an auditory illusion created by the forest acoustics, but the male bear appeared to believe he was being surrounded. With a reluctant huff, he turned away from the mother and cubs, retreating into the forest in the opposite direction of the perceived wolf threat. "I can't believe it," Reed breathed, watching from the SUV window. Talk about perfect timing. But Ranger Finch was frowning, something about the situation not sitting right with him. "There aren't supposed to be wolves in this sector," he said slowly. "Not for decades." As if in answer to his confusion, a figure emerged from the trees, a human shape, carrying what appeared to be a sophisticated electronic device. As the person stepped into the floodlight's glow, they revealed themselves to be a woman in her early 60s, dressed in practical outdoor gear, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Dr. Eleanor Winters. Ranger Finch identified her with surprise. "What in the world are you doing out here?" The newcomer approached, tucking the device under her arm. "Following bear migration patterns," she replied matter-of-factly. "When I heard the commotion, I came to investigate." She gestured to the device. "Wolf call simulator. Quite effective, don't you think?" Zara stared at the older woman with unconcealed awe. "Dr. Winters? The Dr. Winters? Author of Ursine Communication Patterns in North American Black Bears." The older woman smiled slightly. "The very same. And you are?" "Dr. Zara Chen. I've cited your work dozens of times in my own research. It's an honor to meet you." Bryn, with Willow now quieter in her arms, had cautiously exited the SUV along with Reed. "You scared away that bear with fake wolf howls?" she asked incredulously. "Simple predator response manipulation," Dr. Winters explained. "Male bears, particularly solitary ones, will typically avoid confrontation with a wolf pack unless they're starving." Her keen eyes took in the scene. The mother bear now huddled with her cubs at the forest edge, the damaged car with its bent window frame, the array of emergency vehicles forming a perimeter. "Would someone mind explaining what exactly has happened here?" As Ranger Finch gave her a succinct summary of the evening's extraordinary events, Dr. Winters' expression shifted from professional interest to unconcealed amazement. "A human infant influencing bear behavior?" she repeated, her scientific skepticism evident. "And the mother bear actually sought human assistance for her cub? That's unprecedented." "We all witnessed it," Zara confirmed. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes." Dr. Winters approached Bryn, studying Willow with newfound interest. "May I?" she asked, extending her hands. Bryn hesitated, her maternal protectiveness flaring. "What exactly do you want to do?" "Just hold her for a moment, Doctor," Winters assured her. "I've spent 40 years studying interspecies communication. There might be something about your daughter that I can identify, a pheromone signal perhaps, or a frequency in her vocalizations that resonates with ursine auditory processing." Still uncertain but intrigued, Bryn carefully transferred Willow to the researcher's arms. Dr. Winters held the baby with surprising comfort, examining her with gentle thoroughness. "Remarkable," she murmured after a moment. "Absolutely remarkable." "What is it?" Bryn asked anxiously. Dr. Winters returned Willow to her mother's arms. "I can't be certain without proper testing, but your daughter exhibits several characteristics that might explain her unusual connection with the bears." "What kind of characteristics?" Reed asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. "For one, her scent profile is unusually neutral for a human infant," Dr. Winters explained. "Most humans, especially young ones, emit fear pheromones when in proximity to predators. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. Your daughter doesn't seem to have that response, and her vocalizations—" She paused, considering her words carefully. "They contain harmonic patterns remarkably similar to bear-cub distress calls." "Are you saying my baby sounds like a bear cub when she cries?" Bryn asked incredulously. "Not to our ears," Dr. Winters clarified, but bears hear in different frequency ranges than humans do. It's possible that certain aspects of your daughter's cries fall within the acoustic parameters that trigger maternal response in female bears. While this extraordinary conversation was taking place, the wildlife sanctuary team had arrived and was preparing to safely transport the mother bear and her cubs. Under Zara's direction, they worked quietly and efficiently, setting up a temporary containment area. "We need to move them soon," Zara told the group. "The mother is exhausted, and the cubs need proper medical assessment. The sooner we get them to the sanctuary, the better their chances." "I'd like to follow up on this, Doctor," Winters said, her researcher's mind clearly racing with possibilities. This interaction could represent a significant breakthrough in our understanding of interspecies empathy. Ranger Finch nodded thoughtfully. "I need to file a full report on this incident anyway. Perhaps we should all meet tomorrow at the sanctuary after everyone's had some rest." As they discussed logistics, a new complication arose. The mother bear, who had been resting with her cubs at the forest edge, suddenly struggled to her feet. Before anyone could react, she began limping purposefully toward Bryn and Willow. "Don't move," Dr. Winters instructed as everyone tensed. "Let's see what she does." The massive animal approached slowly, showing none of the aggression one would expect. Instead, she moved with deliberate care, stopping about 10 feet from Bryn and her baby. There, the bear did something truly remarkable. She gently nudged one of her cubs forward, as if presenting it to the humans. "She's showing us her baby," Zara whispered, awestruck. The tiny cub, the one they had helped revive, took wobbling steps toward Willow, guided by its mother's gentle prodding. When it was just a few feet away, it sat back on its haunches and made a small, chirping sound. In response, Willow laughed, a bright, bubbling sound that seemed to delight the bear cub. The mother bear watched this interaction with what could only be described as approval, her exhausted body relaxing slightly. "This defies everything we know about wild bear behavior," Dr. Winters murmured, her scientific mind struggling to process what her eyes were seeing. "She's treating you as allies, not threats." The extraordinary moment stretched on for several heartbeats before the cub began to tire, wobbling back to its mother. The bear gathered all 3 of her babies close, gave one last long look at Bryn and Willow, then slowly turned and began making her way deeper into the forest. "Wait!" Zara called out, alarmed. "She's leaving. We need to get them to the sanctuary." "Let her go," Dr. Winters advised, raising a hand to halt the wildlife team that had begun to move forward. "She's made her choice. Sometimes the best thing we can do for wild animals is to respect their decisions." "But the cubs," Zara protested. "They need medical attention and that male bear might return." "I think she knows what she's doing," Dr. Winters replied with quiet certainty. "She's heading east, toward the National Forest Preserve. It's protected land, with less human activity and more natural food sources, and she's putting distance between her family and the male's territory." Reluctantly, Zara signaled the wildlife team to stand down. They watched as the bear family disappeared into the darkness of the forest, leaving behind an astonished group of humans forever changed by what they had witnessed. The sudden wail of a siren shattered the moment, the sound of an approaching ambulance. Ranger Finch frowned, returning to his radio. "I didn't request medical services," he said into the device. "Please advise on incoming ambulance." The reply came back immediately. "Regional Hospital dispatched emergency services after report of a pregnant woman in distress at your location." Confused, Ranger Finch looked around at the group. "There must be some misunderstanding. We don't have a pregnant woman here." But as he spoke, Bryn suddenly doubled over, nearly dropping Willow in the process. Reed jumped forward, catching the baby just as Bryn clutched her abdomen, her face contorted in pain. "Bryn?" Zara rushed to her friend's side, supporting her as her knees buckled. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," Bryn gasped, her face pale with shock and pain. "It feels like contractions." "That's impossible," Zara said, helping her to sit on the ground. "You just had Willow 6 months ago." 3 months after Willow was born, Bryn managed between gritted teeth, "I found out I was pregnant again. The doctor said it was rare, but possible." Another wave of pain washed over her and she cried out, "I'm only 7 months along. It's too early." The approaching ambulance was now visible, its lights cutting through the night as it sped toward them. The evening had taken yet another unexpected turn, from a bear giving birth on the roadside to a human about to do the same. Premature labor, Dr. Winters diagnosed, kneeling beside Bryn, likely triggered by the stress and adrenaline of tonight's events. "We need to get her to a hospital," Zara said urgently, signaling to the approaching ambulance. Reed stood nearby, awkwardly holding Willow, who had begun to cry as if sensing her mother's distress. "It's okay, little one," he soothed, bouncing her gently. "Your mom's going to be fine." As the ambulance pulled up and paramedics rushed out with a stretcher, Bryn reached for Zara's hand, squeezing it painfully tight. "My husband," she gasped. "Theo. He doesn't know where I am. We had a fight and I just left. We'll find him," Ranger Finch assured her, already pulling out his phone. "What's his full name and contact information?" "Theodore Holloway," Bryn managed, before another contraction seized her. "He's a ranger, too. Pinewood District, West Sector." Ranger Finch's expression shifted to one of shock. "Theo Holloway is your husband. He's been organizing search parties for you and Willow for the past 6 hours. There are rangers combing every road and trail in the Western District." This revelation hit Bryn hard, tears springing to her eyes. "I should have called him. I was just so angry." The paramedics were now lifting Bryn onto the stretcher, efficiently checking her vitals and preparing her for transport. "BP is elevated, contractions approximately 4 minutes apart," one reported. "We need to move now." "I'll call Theo right away," Ranger Finch promised. "Let him know where you're headed." "What about Willow?" Bryn asked frantically, trying to see her daughter as the paramedics began to wheel her toward the ambulance. Reed stepped forward, still holding the fussing baby. "I can bring her in my truck," he offered. "Follow right behind the ambulance." "I should go with her in the ambulance," Zara countered. "I have medical training." "Actually," Dr. Winters interjected thoughtfully, "it might be best if Reed takes the baby in his vehicle. Ambulances can be frightening for infants, and premature labor can be unpredictable. It would be better for Willow to arrive at the hospital a few minutes later than to witness her mother in distress." Bryn, despite her pain, considered this advice. "She's right," she agreed reluctantly. "Reed, please take care of her. Her diaper bag is in my car." "I will," Reed promised solemnly. "We'll be right behind you." As the paramedics prepared to load Bryn into the ambulance, she suddenly reached out toward the forest where the bear family had disappeared. "Wait," she called out weakly. "The bears. We have to make sure they're safe." "I'll track them myself, Doctor," Winters assured her. "Monitor their progress and ensure they establish a secure den site. You have my word." This promise seemed to satisfy Bryn, who finally allowed herself to be loaded into the ambulance. Zara climbed in beside her, offering comfort as the doors closed and the vehicle sped off toward the nearest hospital, sirens blaring once more. Left behind at the scene, Ranger Finch, Dr. Winters and Reed, with baby Willow, watched the ambulance disappear around a curve in the road. "This has been the strangest night of my entire career," Ranger Finch declared, rubbing his beard wearily. "And potentially the most significant, Doctor," Winters added. "What we witnessed here, the interaction between your friend's baby and that mother bear, could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication." Reed looked down at Willow, who had finally settled in his arms, her eyelids growing heavy with exhaustion. "You're quite the little miracle worker, aren't you?" he murmured to the drowsy infant. As if in response, Willow yawned widely, then turned her head to gaze toward the forest where the bears had vanished. For just a moment, Reed could have sworn he heard the distant sound of a bear cub's call, answered immediately by its mother. "We should get going," he said, suddenly anxious to reach the hospital. "Her father will want to see her." Dr. Winters nodded, already turning toward her own vehicle. "I'll head into the forest, see if I can locate the bear family." "I'll need statements from all of you," Ranger Finch reminded them, "but it can wait until morning." As they prepared to go their separate ways, a subtle change came over the forest. The wind, which had been still throughout most of the evening's events, suddenly picked up, carrying with it the fresh scent of pine and the promise of approaching rain. Nature seemed to be reclaiming the scene, erasing the evidence of the extraordinary encounter between species. Reed carefully settled Willow into a makeshift car seat, fashioned from blankets in the passenger side of his truck. As he did, the infant's tiny hand closed around his index finger with surprising strength. Looking into her eyes, he saw a wisdom that seemed impossible in one so young, as though the night's events had left an indelible mark on her developing consciousness. "You're going to be a big sister," he told her softly, "and something tells me you're going to have some amazing stories to tell your little brother or sister when they're old enough to understand." With that, he gently extracted his finger, closed the passenger door, and circled around to the driver's side. The night's adventure was far from over, and somewhere ahead, a new life was preparing to enter the world. Another miracle to join the many they had already witnessed beneath the stars of Pinewood Highway. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the mother bear had found a sheltered hollow beneath an ancient oak tree. There, she gathered her 3 cubs close, licking them tenderly as they nursed for the second time. The smallest one, the cub that had been revived by human hands, seemed to thrive despite its difficult entry into the world, nursing vigorously alongside its siblings. As the bear family settled into their temporary den, something extraordinary happened in the sky above. The clouds that had been gathering parted briefly, allowing a shaft of moonlight to illuminate the forest floor. In that silver glow, other forest creatures emerged cautiously, a fox with her kits, a family of raccoons, even a majestic owl perched on a nearby branch. It was as though word had spread through some ancient animal communication network that something miraculous had occurred, bringing different species together in silent witness. The mother bear, sensing the presence of these forest neighbors, raised her head briefly. Rather than displaying the territorial aggression typical of her kind, she merely acknowledged them with a calm gaze before returning her attention to her cubs. Tonight, at least, the normal rules of the forest had been suspended, replaced by something older and more profound, a recognition of shared motherhood that transcended species boundaries. And high above, unknown to the animals below, a satellite silently captured the unusual gathering from its orbit, its sophisticated infrared sensors detecting the congregation of wildlife in a pattern so unusual that it would later trigger an automated alert at the National Wildlife Monitoring Center, adding yet another layer to the story that had begun with a frightened bear and a car window on a quiet stretch of highway. The events of this extraordinary night were only beginning to ripple outward, touching lives both human and animal in ways no one could yet predict. At its center was a baby girl named Willow, whose connection to the wild had manifested in a way that defied scientific explanation, a connection that would shape her destiny in the years to come, though none could yet know how profoundly. The ambulance raced through the winding forest roads, its siren cutting through the night as paramedics worked steadily to stabilize Bryn. Inside the sterile confines of the vehicle, the extraordinary events with the bears seemed almost dreamlike, a stark contrast to the very real medical emergency unfolding now. BP is 140/90, reported the paramedic, a young woman with copper-colored hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her name tag read, Paramedic Olivia Nash. Contractions still coming at irregular intervals, approximately 3 to 4 minutes apart. Zara held Bryn's hand tightly, offering what comfort she could as her friend grimaced through another contraction. "Just breathe," she encouraged. "Remember your LeMay's training from Willow." "This is different," Bryn gasped, her face pale and beaded with sweat. "It feels wrong somehow, too intense. And it's too early, Zara. I'm barely at 7 months. Paramedic Nash exchanged a concerned glance with her partner before returning her attention to Bryn. "We've alerted Pinewood Memorial Hospital. They're preparing the NICU just in case, but many babies born at 7 months do very well with proper care." "Theo," Bryn whispered as the contraction subsided, "is he going to make it?" Zara checked her phone, which had finally found service as they approached the town. Ranger Finch texted, "Theo is meeting us at the hospital. He's about 15 minutes out." Relief washed over Bryn's face, quickly replaced by guilt. "I shouldn't have left like that. We had such a stupid fight. About paint colors for the nursery, of all things." A rueful laugh escaped her, ending in a wince as another contraction began building. "I was so hormonal, I just grabbed Willow and drove off. I didn't even tell him where I was going." "Hey," Zara said softly, squeezing her friend's hand. "This isn't the time to beat yourself up. Pregnant women have been storming out after arguments since the beginning of time. The important thing is you're both okay, and Theo will be there soon." The ambulance swerved slightly, and Paramedic Nash steadied herself against the wall. "Sorry about that, folks," called the driver from the front. "There's something in the road up ahead." Through the small window separating the driver's compartment from the back, Zara caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a large, fallen branch blocking part of the highway. The ambulance slowed as the driver navigated carefully around it. "That's odd," Paramedic Nash remarked, frowning slightly. "That wasn't there when we came through earlier." As the ambulance passed the obstruction, Zara noticed something that made her blood run cold. Fresh claw marks on the branch, as though it had been deliberately dragged into position. Could you go a little faster, please?" she called to the driver, trying to keep the alarm out of her voice. "Something wrong?" Bryn asked, picking up on her friend's tension despite her own pain. Before Zara could answer, a heavy thud on the roof of the ambulance made everyone freeze. Paramedic Nash reached instinctively for the radio, but before she could call for help, the ambulance lurched violently to one side, nearly tipping over before the driver managed to correct its course. "What the hell was that?" the driver shouted. "Something's on the roof," Nash replied, her professional calm giving way to alarm. A low, rumbling growl filtered through the metal ceiling of the ambulance, a sound Zara and Bryn immediately recognized. "It's a bear," Bryn whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It followed us." "That's impossible," Zara said, though her voice lacked conviction. After what they'd witnessed earlier, she wasn't sure what was impossible anymore. Another violent impact rocked the ambulance, this time accompanied by the sound of claws raking across metal. The driver accelerated sharply, hoping to dislodge their unwelcome passenger, but the bear, if that's indeed what it was, clung tenaciously to the roof. "Almost to the hospital," the driver announced tensely. "Just 3 more miles." Bryn cried out as the most intense contraction yet seized her, the monitors beeping urgently as her blood pressure spiked. Paramedic Nash immediately refocused on her patient, professional training overriding her fear of whatever was attacking their vehicle. "Baby's heart rate is dropping," she reported grimly. "We need to get her to the hospital now." The ambulance sped up, sirens wailing at full volume as they raced down the final stretch of road leading to Pinewood Memorial. Whatever was on the roof continued to growl and scratch, but its attacks seemed less coordinated now, as though it was having difficulty maintaining its position on the speeding Vehi. As the lights of the hospital came into view, the creature gave one final, frustrated roar before they heard a heavy thud, the sound of it leaping or falling from the roof. The driver didn't slow down until they screeched to a halt in the emergency bay, where a team of medical personnel was already waiting with a gurney. "Pregnant woman, 32 weeks, premature labor," Paramedic Nash reported crisply as they transferred Bryn. "BP elevated, fetal distress indicated. Also, be advised, possible wildlife situation. Something attacked our vehicle en route." The medical team exchanged confused glances at this last statement but focused on Bryn, wheeling her rapidly through the emergency department doors. Zara followed, casting one nervous glance back at the ambulance. Deep gouges marred its roof and sides, and tufts of dark fur were caught in some of the crevices. Inside the hospital, chaos gave way to the controlled urgency of medical professionals in their element. Dr. Miranda Levinson, the attending obstetrician, quickly examined Bryn while nurses established IVs and connected monitoring equipment. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Dr. Levinson," she introduced herself, her manner calm but serious. "You're experiencing premature labor, but we're going to do everything we can for you and your baby. The good news is that at 32 weeks the survival rate is very high." "My husband," Bryn gasped between contractions. "Is he here yet?" "We've been notified he's on his way," a nurse assured her. "Should be here any minute." Dr. Levinson completed her examination with a slight frown. "You're already at 8 centimeters. This baby is coming fast." She looked up at the fetal monitor, her frown deepening. "And the little one's heart rate is concerning me. I think we need to move toward a C-section." "No," Bryn protested. "I want to try naturally first, with Willow." "This isn't the same situation as your first birth," Dr. Levinson interrupted gently but firmly. "This baby is premature and showing signs of distress. A C-section is the safest option right now." While this conversation was taking place, Zara had stepped out to call Reed and check on Willow. She was surprised to find the wildlife rescuer already in the hospital waiting room, the baby sleeping peacefully in his arms. "You made good time," she remarked, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Willow. "Ranger's shortcut," Reed explained with a small smile. "How's Bryn?" "They're talking about an emergency C-section," Zara replied, concern evident in her voice. "The baby's in distress, and Reed... She hesitated, uncertain how to explain what had happened on the drive. "Something attacked the ambulance on the way here, something big." Reed's expression grew serious. "The male bear? I don't know. Maybe. But how would it have known which vehicle to follow? And why would it care?" Before Reed could respond, the hospital doors burst open as a man in a ranger's uniform rushed in, his face a mask of panic and concern. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the same blue eyes as Willow. "Theo," Zara identified him, hurrying over. "Over here." "Theo, Holloway's relief at seeing a familiar face was palpable. "Zara? What are you— Never mind that. Where's Bryn? Is she okay? And Willow?" His eyes landed on his daughter in Reed's arms, and some of the tension left his shoulders. "Bryn's in labor," Zara explained quickly. "They're preparing for an emergency C-section. Willow is fine, just sleeping." "And you are?" Theo asked Reed, his protective father instincts clearly on high alert despite the circumstances. "Reed Blackwood, Wildlife Rescue," Reed introduced himself, carefully transferring the sleeping Willow to her father's eager arms. "I was at the incident with the bear, helped out a bit." "The bear," Theo repeated, cradling his daughter close. Ranger Finch's message mentioned something about Bryn's car and a bear. What exactly happened out there? Before anyone could attempt to explain the extraordinary events of the evening, a nurse appeared in the waiting room doorway. "Mr. Holloway, your wife is asking for you. We're prepping her for surgery now." Theo looked down at Willow, reluctant to disturb her but clearly torn about what to do. "We'll watch her," Zara offered. "You go be with Bryn." After a moment's hesitation, Theo carefully transferred his sleeping daughter back to Reed's arms, then followed the nurse through the double doors leading to the surgical wing. "This is some night," Reed remarked quietly as he settled back into a waiting room chair with Willow. "Bears giving birth on highways, ambulances being attacked, and now this." "Speaking of the attack," Zara said, lowering her voice, "I didn't want to alarm Theo, but those claw marks on the ambulance, they didn't look like they came from the male bear we saw earlier." Reed raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "They were different somehow. Smaller, maybe?" "I'm not sure," Zara admitted. "It just feels like there's something we're missing here." As if in response to her words, Willow stirred in Reed's arms, her tiny face scrunching up as she yawned. When her eyes opened, they seemed to focus on something beyond the waiting room walls, something only she could see. She made a soft cooing sound, reaching out toward the large windows that looked out onto the hospital parking lot and the forest beyond. Both adults turned to follow her gaze, just in time to see a dark shape slipping between two parked cars, a shape that moved with the unmistakable gait of a bear, but smaller than the ones they had encountered earlier. "Is that—" Reed began, rising from his seat. "It can't be," Zara interrupted, already moving toward the window for a better look. "The mother bear is miles away by now, with her cubs." As they watched, the creature emerged fully into the glow of a parking lot light, revealing itself to be not a full-grown bear at all, but an adolescent, perhaps a year or two old, judging by its size. "A juvenile black bear," Reed identified, his professional knowledge taking over despite his surprise. "But what is it doing here? They don't usually venture this close to town." The young bear paused beneath the light, raising its snout as if testing the air. Then, in a behavior that sent chills down both observers' spines, it looked directly at the hospital window, directly at them, or more specifically at Willow. The baby, as if responding to some silent communication, wriggled excitedly in Reed's arms, making those same unusual cooing sounds they had heard her make with the mother bear earlier. "This is impossible," Zara breathed. "How could it have tracked us here? And why would it care?" Reed's mind was racing through possibilities. Bears have an incredible sense of smell. Maybe it picked up Willow's scent? But even so, a wild bear wouldn't normally follow humans, especially not to a place as unnatural as a hospital. Unless, Zara started, a wild theory forming in her mind. Unless what? What if it's not just any juvenile bear? Zara suggested, her scientific mind struggling with the implications of what she was about to propose. What if it's somehow connected to the mother bear from earlier? A previous offspring, perhaps. Reed considered this, his expression thoughtful. Bears typically chase away their young after about a year and a half. If this is an older cub from a previous litter, it should be on its own by now, establishing separate territory. But what if this family is different? Zara pressed. Dr. Winters mentioned that the mother bear's behavior was unprecedented. What if that extends to her relationship with her older cubs as well? Before they could explore this theory further, a security guard entered the waiting room, making his rounds. Noticing them standing by the window, he approached with a friendly nod. "Everything all right, folks?" Reed and Zara exchanged a quick glance, silently agreeing not to mention the bear. It would only cause panic and potentially lead to the animal being shot. "Fine, thanks," Zara replied with a forced smile. "Just getting some air while we wait for news about our friend." The guard seemed satisfied with this explanation and continued on his rounds. Once he was out of earshot, Reed and Zara returned their attention to the window, but the juvenile bear had vanished. "We should call Dr. Winters," Zara suggested. She might know what to make of this. Reed nodded agreement, shifting Willow to a more comfortable position as she began to fuss slightly. "I think someone's getting hungry," he observed. "There should be formula in her diaper bag," Zara said, reaching for the pink and gray bag Bryn had packed. As she rummaged through it, a nurse appeared in the waiting room doorway. "Are you the family of Bryn Holloway?" she asked. Both Zara and Reed looked up expectantly. "She's just gone into surgery," the nurse informed them. "Dr. Levinson is performing the C-section now. We should have news for you shortly." "Thank you," Zara replied, feeling a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Despite the nurse's professional calm, there was something in her manner that suggested all was not proceeding as routinely as they might hope. As the nurse left, Zara finally located a pre-measured bottle of formula in the diaper bag. She handed it to Reed, who seemed surprisingly adept at feeding the infant. "You mentioned your sister has twins," Zara recalled, watching his easy manner with Willow. Reed nodded, a fond smile softening his features. "Yeah, Lily and Lucas. They're 3 now, but I helped out a lot when they were babies." His smile faded slightly. "After my brother-in-law was deployed overseas." "That was good of you," Zara commented, settling into the chair beside him. Reed shrugged modestly. "Family takes care of family." He looked down at Willow, who was eagerly drinking her formula. "Though, I have to admit, this little one makes it easy. Such a chill baby, especially considering everything she's been through tonight." Zara was about to respond when her phone rang. An unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello?" "Dr. Chen, this is Eleanor Winters." The bear researcher's voice sounded tense and slightly breathless, as though she was moving quickly. "Something very unusual is happening with our bear family." "Is Willow still with you?" Zara sat up straighter, immediately alert. "Yes, she's right here. What's going on?" "I've been tracking the mother bear and her cubs," Dr. Winters explained, the sound of rustling foliage audible in the background of the call. "They initially headed east as expected, but about 20 minutes ago they abruptly changed direction. They're now moving with purpose toward the town." "Toward the hospital?" Zara asked, already suspecting the answer. "Precisely, Doctor," Winters confirmed grimly. "And they're not alone. They've been joined by what appears to be an adolescent bear, likely a female from a previous litter. I've never seen anything like it. It's as though they're coordinating somehow." Zara met Reed's concerned gaze, mouthing "bear family" to him as she continued the conversation. "We just saw a juvenile bear in the hospital parking lot. It seemed to be looking for Willow." There was a moment of silence on the other end as Dr. Winters processed this information. This goes beyond anything documented in ursine behavior studies. There's some sort of connection at play here that science hasn't identified yet. A pause, then. How is Bryn doing? In surgery now, emergency C-section. Another pause. I believe these events may be connected. The timing is too coincidental. The researcher's voice took on a new urgency. Listen carefully, Doctor. Chen. If I'm right about this, the bears are somehow attuned to both Willow and Bryn. The question is why they're so determined to reach the hospital, and whether their presence represents a threat or something else entirely. Before Zara could respond, the hospital's external alarm system suddenly blared to life. A series of short, sharp beeps that made Willow startle and begin to cry. "What's that?" Reed asked, trying to soothe the upset baby. A hospital security guard rushed through the waiting room, speaking urgently into his radio. Confirmed wildlife incursion, east entrance, multiple bears, initiating lockdown protocols. Dr. Winters, still on the phone, heard this. "I'm about 5 minutes out," she told Zara. "Try to keep everyone calm until I get there. These bears aren't behaving aggressively, but fear could turn this dangerous very quickly." The call ended just as Ranger Finch burst through the waiting room doors, his uniform disheveled and his expression harried. "There you are," he said with evident relief upon seeing Reed, Zara, and Willow. "We've got a situation." "The bears," Zara confirmed. "We know. Dr. Winters just called." "Not just the bears," Finch corrected grimly. "Remember our male bear from earlier? The big one that was threatening the mother and cubs? He's shown up too, and he's in a territorial mood." Reed stood up, still holding Willow, who had resumed crying despite his best efforts to calm her. "So, we've got the mother bear with her 3 newborn cubs, an adolescent female who's likely from a previous litter, and now an aggressive male bear, all converging on a hospital full of sick people." "That about sums it up," Finch acknowledged. "Fish and Wildlife are on their way with tranquilizers, but they're at least 30 minutes out." "We need to keep the male away from the mother and cubs," Zara said decisively. "If he gets to the newborns—" "I know," Finch agreed, his expression somber. "But how do we manage that without putting hospital patients at risk?" An announcement came over the hospital PA system. "Attention all staff and visitors. We are implementing emergency lockdown procedures due to a wildlife threat outside the building. Please remain in your current locations with doors and windows secured until further notice." As the announcement ended, Willow's cries suddenly intensified, becoming more insistent and taking on that unusual harmonic quality they had noticed earlier, the one Dr. Winters had said resembled bear-cub distress calls. Almost immediately, they heard a response, a deep, rumbling roar from somewhere outside the building, followed by several higher-pitched calls that could only be coming from the cubs. "They're responding to her," Reed realized, looking down at the crying infant with newfound wonder. "It's like they're communicating." Zara made a quick decision. "Ranger Finch, can you get us access to the roof, or at least a high window with a view of the east entrance?" Finch considered this request for only a moment before nodding. "Follow me. Staff elevator to the 4th floor. There's an observation deck for the helicopter pad." As they hurried through the hospital corridors, members of the security team were ushering patients and visitors into rooms and away from windows. The atmosphere was tense but orderly. Hospitals were well practiced in emergency protocols of all kinds, even if bear invasion wasn't typically on their drill schedule. The staff elevator required a key card, which Finch provided from his ranger credentials. As they ascended to the 4th floor, Willow's cries gradually subsided, replaced by those same curious cooing sounds. "She knows something we don't," Reed remarked softly, studying the infant's face. I swear she's tracking the bears somehow. The elevator doors opened onto a quiet hallway that led to a set of heavy double doors marked Helipad Access, authorized personnel only. Finch used his keycard again, and they emerged onto a wide, flat roof area, where a helicopter landing pad was marked with bright paint and lighting. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of the hospital grounds and the east entrance below. What they saw made them all stop in their tracks. The mother bear stood protectively in front of the emergency entrance, her 3 tiny cubs huddled between her legs. Facing her from about 20 yards away was the massive male bear, his posture aggressive as he paced back and forth, occasionally rising onto his hind legs to display his full, intimidating height. And positioned between these 2 powerhouses, as if mediating the confrontation, was the adolescent female bear, her stance wary but determined as she faced down the much larger male. "She's protecting her mother and siblings," Zara breathed in astonishment. "Family bonds persisting into adulthood? This defies everything we know about black bear social structure." "Look," Reed pointed urgently. "The male is getting ready to charge." Sure enough, the massive bear had lowered his head, pawing at the ground in the unmistakable preparation for an attack. The adolescent female, though clearly outmatched, stood her ground, emitting a warning growl that seemed impossibly brave given the size discrepancy. "We have to do something," Zara said desperately, turning to Ranger Finch. "If that male attacks, I have my tranquilizer gun," Finch replied, already removing it from his holster. "But at this distance, with this wind, I'm not confident of hitting the target, and a partial dose would only enrage him further." As they debated their limited options, Willow suddenly let out a sound unlike anything they had heard from her before. Not quite a cry, not quite a laugh, but something in between that carried clearly through the night air. The effect on the bears was immediate and astonishing. All 5 animals, the mother, her 3 cubs, and even the aggressive male, froze, their heads turning upward toward the source of the sound. The male bear's aggressive posture eased slightly, confusion replacing rage in his body language. "She's doing it again," Reed whispered, looking down at Willow with a mixture of awe and concern. "Somehow communicating with them." Willow repeated the strange vocalization, wiggling insistently in Reed's arms and reaching out toward the bears below. The infant's face showed none of the fear one would expect, only a kind of focused determination that seemed impossible in one so young. "I think," Zara began hesitantly, struggling to articulate the bizarre theory forming in her mind. "I think she wants to go down there." "Absolutely not," Finch stated firmly. "It's out of the question. Those are wild animals in a highly agitated state." "But look at them," Zara insisted, gesturing at the scene below. "They're responding to her. The male is actually backing down." It was true. The massive bear had taken several steps backward, his aggressive stance replaced by what appeared to be cautious curiosity. The adolescent female had moved to join her mother and siblings, the family unit now presenting a unified front as they all gazed upward at the humans on the roof. "I can't authorize putting an infant in proximity to wild bears," Finch maintained, though his tone suggested he was struggling with the unprecedented nature of the situation. "It goes against every safety protocol we have." As this tense conversation unfolded, the door to the roof burst open, and Dr. Eleanor Winters rushed out, slightly out of breath from climbing the stairs. "Where is she?" she demanded without preamble. "Where's Willow?" Reed turned, revealing the baby in his arms. Dr. Winters approached quickly, studying the infant with a researcher's intensity. "The connection is stronger than I initially theorized," she said, almost to herself. She's not just communicating with them, she's influencing their behavior somehow. We were just debating whether to take her downstairs, Zara explained. The male bear was about to attack, but when Willow made that sound, I heard it, Dr. Winters nodded, even from the stairwell. It's remarkable. She turned to Ranger Finch. I know what you're thinking, Garrett. It's dangerous, unprecedented, against protocol. But we're witnessing something extraordinary here. Something that could transform our understanding of interspecies communication. And if you're wrong, Finch challenged. If those bears are simply confused, not communicating, if the male decides to attack anyway, we're talking about an infant's life, Eleanor. Before Dr. Winters could respond, a new sound cut through the night. An ambulance siren growing rapidly louder as the vehicle approached the hospital. The bears below immediately reacted, the mother gathering her cubs closer, while the male renewed his aggressive posture. That siren is going to undo everything, Dr. Winters warned. It's triggering their flight or fight response. Sure enough, the male bear began to advance again, this time with more purpose. The adolescent female moved to intercept him, but it was clear she was outmatched. The mother bear, unable to flee with her newborn cubs, prepared to defend her offspring, a fight she had little chance of winning in her weakened state. We're out of time, Zara said urgently. Ranger Finch, you have to make a decision. Finch looked from the bears to Willow, then to Dr. Winters, his expression tortured. Finally, he gave a short, reluctant nod. If we do this, we do it my way. I'll take the baby. The rest of you stay up here. And at the first sign of aggression from any of the bears, I'm retreating immediately. Understood? Everyone nodded agreement, though Reed looked pained as he prepared to hand Willow over. Be careful with her, he said, his voice gruff with emotion, as he transferred the baby to Finch's capable hands. Like she was my own, Finch promised solemnly. With Willow securely in his arms, Ranger Finch made his way back through the roof doors and down to the ground level. Zara, Reed, and Dr. Winters rushed to the edge of the roof to watch what would happen next. Minutes that felt like hours passed before they saw Finch emerge cautiously from a side entrance, positioning himself within sight of the bears, but with quick access back to the safety of the building. He held Willow carefully, her tiny form barely visible in the glow of the security lights. The reaction from the bears was immediate and dramatic. The male froze in his advance, his massive head turning toward the ranger and the baby. The mother bear and adolescent female also focused their attention on this new development, their postures alert but not aggressive. Willow, for her part, seemed completely at ease in the tense situation. She made that same unusual cooing sound, waving her tiny arms in a motion that seemed almost deliberate. And then something happened that none of the observers would ever forget. The male bear, after a moment of apparent hesitation, slowly lowered himself to the ground in a position that looked remarkably like submission. He remained there, not approaching but not retreating either, his demeanor completely transformed from the aggressive behavior of moments before. He's deferring to her, Dr. Winters whispered in amazement. That male bear, the apex predator of this forest, is showing deference to a human infant. The mother bear, seeing the male's submission, began to move cautiously forward with her cubs, the adolescent female protectively at her side. The bear family approached to within about 15 feet of where Finch stood with Willow, then stopped, as if respecting an invisible boundary. From their position on the roof, Zara, Reed, and Dr. Winters could only watch in awe as this extraordinary tableau held for several long moments. A human holding a baby, facing a family of bears, with a massive male bear in a position of unexpected submission nearby. What happened next would become the subject of scientific papers, news stories, and local legend for years to come. The mother bear gently nudged one of her cubs forward, the smallest one, the one that had been revived earlier that evening. The tiny cub stumbled awkwardly toward Finch and Willow, stopping just a few feet away. There, it sat back on its haunches and made a small, chirping sound. In response, Willow laughed, that bright, bubbling sound they had heard earlier at the roadside. The bear cub tilted its head, as if responding to the sound, then made a little circle before returning to its mother. The entire sequence felt ritualistic somehow, as though some ancient ceremony was being conducted between species, a ceremony whose meaning was lost to human understanding, but remained encoded in some deeper, more primal part of consciousness that Willow, in her infant innocence, could still access. After this extraordinary exchange, the mother bear gathered her cubs and began to retreat, the adolescent female falling into step beside her. The male bear remained in his submissive posture until the family had put some distance between them, then slowly rose, and with one final look toward Willow, turned and lumbered back toward the forest. As the bears disappeared into the tree line, a spontaneous round of applause broke out from hospital windows where staff and patients had been watching the unprecedented encounter. Ranger Finch, visibly relieved, quickly returned to the building with Willow safe in his arms. When they rejoined the group on the roof, Finch's expression was one of stunned disbelief. "In 30 years as a ranger," he said, carefully returning Willow to Reed's eager arms, "I have never witnessed anything remotely like what just happened." "No one has," Dr. Winters confirmed, her scientist's mind already racing with the implications. "What we just observed rewrites our understanding of interspecies communication, animal cognition, and possibly even human developmental psychology." Before they could further discuss the extraordinary event, the roof door opened again, and a hospital administrator appeared, looking both relieved and confused. "The bears are gone," she confirmed unnecessarily. "Animal control is doing a final sweep, but it appears the situation has resolved itself." She looked at the strange gathering on the roof with undisguised curiosity. Would someone care to explain what just happened? Before anyone could attempt to answer this complex question, another hospital staff member rushed through the door, this one wearing surgical scrubs. "Are you the family of Bryn Holloway?" she asked, breathlessly. "Yes," Zara stepped forward anxiously. "Is she all right? The baby?" The surgical nurse broke into a relieved smile. "Both mother and baby are doing well. It was a touch and go for a moment. There were some complications with the umbilical cord, but everything worked out. Mrs. Holloway has delivered a healthy baby boy. He's small, of course, being premature, but his vitals are strong." A collective sigh of relief passed through the group. "Can we see them?" Reed asked, still holding Willow, who had finally begun to show signs of exhaustion after her extraordinary night. "The father is with them now," the nurse replied, "but they'll be moved to recovery soon, and you can visit briefly. The baby will need to remain in the NICU for observation, standard procedure for premature births." As the nurse left to return to her duties, the group exchanged glances filled with wonder at the events of the night. Bears giving birth on a highway, a human baby communicating with wild animals, and now the arrival of a new life. A baby boy born under the most unusual of circumstances. "I can't help but wonder," Zara said softly, "if there's some connection between the timing of the bear's appearance and Bryn going into labor. It's almost as if they knew," Dr. Winters finished the thought. "As if they somehow sensed that Willow's sibling was in distress and came to—" "What?" help somehow? It was a question none of them could answer with any scientific certainty. Yet there was a feeling among all present that they had witnessed something profound, something that transcended ordinary understanding and hinted at deeper connections between all living things. As they made their way back inside the hospital, ready to meet the newest member of the Holloway family, none of them noticed the lone figure watching from the edge of the forest. Standing just within the tree line, Dr. Daniel Morrison, the controversial wildlife behaviorist whose theories about animal consciousness had been dismissed by the scientific community for decades, lowered his high-powered binoculars and smiled with quiet vindication. "I knew it," he whispered to himself, making a quick note in his weathered field journal. The Holloway baby, exactly as predicted. He slipped the journal into his pocket and disappeared deeper into the forest, following the bear's trail. The true significance of what had transpired that night was only beginning to unfold, threads of destiny weaving together in patterns that would take years to fully reveal themselves. Meanwhile, in a quiet recovery room at Pinewood Memorial Hospital, Bryn Holloway held her newborn son for the first time, her husband Theo at her side, his eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. Outside their door, nurses prepared to bring in Willow for her first meeting with her baby brother. "What should we name him?" Theo asked softly, gently stroking his son's tiny head with its surprising amount of dark hair. Bryn gazed down at her newborn, his tiny features still red and slightly swollen from birth, but perfect in every way. She thought about the extraordinary night that had brought them to this moment. The frightened mother bear trapped in her car window, the miraculous delivery of the 3 bear cubs on the highway, the mysterious connection between Willow and the wild creatures, and now the early arrival of her son. "Forrest," she said with quiet certainty. "His name is Forrest Theodore Holloway." Theo smiled, nodding his approval. "It's perfect," he agreed, leaning down to place a gentle kiss on his son's forehead. "Welcome to the world, Forrest." A soft knock at the door preceded Zara's entrance, with Reed following close behind. In Reed's arms, Willow was awake but calm, her blue eyes taking in the hospital room with serene curiosity. "Someone wants to meet her baby brother," Zara announced softly. Bryn's face lit up at the sight of her daughter. "Bring her here," she urged, carefully adjusting little Forrest in one arm to make space for Willow with the other. Reed approached the bed, gently transferring Willow to her father's waiting arms. Theo settled beside Bryn on the edge of the hospital bed, positioning Willow so she could see the newborn. "Willow," Bryn said softly, "this is your brother, Forrest." The baby girl studied the tiny bundle with remarkable focus, then reached out one small hand toward him. When her fingertips gently brushed against Forrest's cheek, the newborn, who had been sleeping peacefully, opened his eyes for the first time. Those in the room gasped softly at what they saw. Unlike Willow's bright blue eyes, Forrest's were a deep amber brown, almost exactly the color of the mother bear's eyes. "Oh my," Zara whispered, exchanging a meaningful glance with Reed. Willow made her special cooing sound, the one that had seemingly communicated with the bears, and to everyone's astonishment, little Forrest responded with a similar sound of his own, despite being only hours old. "The connection," Reed murmured. "It's not just Willow." "It's both of them," Bryn realized, looking from one child to the other with wonder and a hint of apprehension. "What does it mean?" From the doorway, Dr. Eleanor Winters spoke, having arrived just in time to witness the exchange. "It means your children are special, Mrs. Holloway. They possess something most humans have lost, the ability to connect with the natural world in its purest form." Is that a good thing?" Theo asked, his protective instincts evident in his voice. Dr. Winters smiled reassuringly. I believe it is. In a world increasingly disconnected from nature, your children may become important bridges between our species and the wild. They may help us remember what we've forgotten, that we are all part of the same great web of life. Ranger Finch appeared behind Doctor. Winters, his weathered face softened with emotion at the family scene. The bears are safely back in the forest, he reported. Wildlife Services has designated a protected area around their den site. No hunting, no hiking, no disturbances. And the male bear? Zara asked. Keeping his distance, but still in the area, Finch replied, almost like he's standing guard, if you can believe it. After what we witnessed tonight, Reed remarked, I think I can believe just about anything. A comfortable silence fell over the room as they all contemplated the miraculous events that had brought them together. The first light of dawn was beginning to filter through the hospital windows, painting the room in soft golden hues. You should all get some rest, Doctor, Levinson suggested as she entered to check on her patients. It's been quite a night. One by one, the visitors said their goodbyes, promising to return later. Dr. Winters lingered for a moment, her scientific curiosity still evident. With your permission, she said to Bryn and Theo, I'd like to document what happened tonight. Not for publicity, she added quickly, seeing their hesitation, but for science. What your children demonstrated could be crucial to our understanding of human-animal connections. After a thoughtful pause, Bryn nodded. As long as it keeps them safe, she stipulated. And the bears, too. That's my primary concern as well, Doctor, Winters assured her. What happened tonight was a gift, one that deserves to be protected. With that, she too departed, leaving the Holloway family alone together for the first time. Theo settled more comfortably on the bed beside Bryn, cradling Willow while Bryn held Forrest. The new family of 4 formed a perfect circle, bound by love and by something more ancient and mysterious than they could name. Do you think they'll always have this connection with animals? Theo asked quietly, watching as Willow began to doze off, her little hand still reaching toward her brother. I don't know, Bryn admitted, but whatever happens, we'll face it together. Outside the hospital window, a large raven landed on the sill, its intelligent eyes peering into the room. It tapped gently on the glass with its beak, as if offering its own blessing to the special children within. Then, with a flutter of glossy black wings, it took to the sky, soaring over Pinewood Memorial and toward the forest where the Bear family had made their home. In the years that followed, the story of that extraordinary night would be told and retold throughout the community. Some dismissed it as exaggeration or coincidence, but those who had witnessed it firsthand knew better. They had seen something rare and precious, a momentary lifting of the veil between the human world and the wild, a reminder that the boundaries we perceive are perhaps more permeable than we realize. As for Willow and Forrest Holloway, they grew up with an unusual affinity for the natural world. Animals of all kinds seemed drawn to them, from the smallest sparrows to the most cautious deer. And every year, on the anniversary of that remarkable night, their parents would take them to a special overlook in the national forest. There, at a safe distance, they would sometimes glimpse a black bear with 3 growing cubs, and occasionally, if they were especially fortunate, they would spot a larger female bear alongside them, the adolescent who had once faced down a male to protect her family. No one ever saw the mysterious Dr. Morrison again, though his controversial papers on interspecies communication began to gain new respect in academic circles. Ranger Finch continued to patrol the forests around Pinewood, keeping a special eye on the protected bear sanctuary. Reed Blackwood eventually established a wildlife rehabilitation center near the Holloway home, with Zara Chen joining as the resident veterinarian. And Dr. Eleanor Winters published what would become her most acclaimed work, The Holloway Effect: Reassessing Human-Animal Communication Through the Eyes of Children. But perhaps the most significant change was the one that occurred within the community itself. The town of Pinewood, once known primarily for its logging industry, gradually transformed into a center for wildlife conservation and research. Visitors came from around the world to learn about coexistence with nature, drawn by the remarkable story of a bear that gave birth by a roadside and the human baby who somehow bridged the gap between two worlds. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon hung full over the forest, residents would hear the haunting calls of bears echoing from the mountains, calls that seemed to carry messages only the Holloway children could truly understand, reminders of the night when the boundaries between human and animal momentarily dissolved, revealing the deeper connection that had always existed between all living things. As for the mother bear who had started it all, she raised her 3 cubs to adulthood in the protected forest, growing old with dignity in a territory that remained remarkably free from human interference. And if, from time to time, she was seen near the forest edge that overlooked the Holloway home, the rangers simply noted the sighting in their logs and let her be, understanding that some connections transcend the ordinary boundaries of the natural world. And so the story of the pregnant mother bear and the human baby came to be known not as an ending, but as a beginning, the first chapter in a larger tale about rediscovering what it means to be truly part of the natural world. A tale that continues to unfold to this day in the lives of those 2 remarkable children, and all who are fortunate enough to know them.